Okay. Okay, so let's go to the pod. Let's go to the chitas of the day. Today is Monday, right? Today is Monday. Today is the second reading in the portion of Bishalach. Oops, went to the Tanya. Today is the second reading in the portion of Bishalach on chapter 14, verse number 9. Vayidu from Mitzrayim achreihem, and the Egyptians chased after them. The Egyptians chased after them, called and they found them, they took them and camped at the sea. Called Sus Rechav Pare, all the horses and the chariots of Pharaoh, Faroshav, his horsemen, he found them on the mouth of Chiros, in front of the Baal Tzefoin, the idol of Tzefoin. Baal Tzefoin. Verse number 10. Bnei Yisrael, say name, and Paro was coming near. And the Jewish people lifted their eyes. And behold, the Egyptians were advancing after them. And they were extremely afraid. And the children of Israel cried out to God. So Rashi says, it should have said, and Paro was brought near. What means, that's really the Hebrew word it should have used. What does it mean? Hikriv? So Hikriv means he himself came near. That means he himself wanted to show that he is going to be the one who's going to take them back. He's going to capture them and bring them back to Egypt. And all the Egyptian Noisa Achreihem were going after him. Nasa is a singular word. You should have said Noisim. But over here, Nasa Achreihem Belev Echad Ki Ish Echad, that all the Egyptians were going with one heart, one nation. They were out to get the Jews. Another interpretation, it denotes that they, the Israelites, saw the heavenly prince of Egypt. That's why they got afraid. They saw the power of Egypt, the angel of Egypt was advancing from heaven to aid the Egyptians. And that's why it says they cried out to God, because they saw that this is, they have heavenly powers. They sized the heart of the ancestors, they prayed. Concerning Abraham, it says, they prayed, and Yitzhak prayed, and Yaakov prayed, so the Jewish people prayed. Verse 11. And then they turned to Moses, and they said to Moses, is there no graves in Egypt? You have taken us to die in the desert. What have you done to us? To take us out of Egypt. So Rashi says, because of the want, namely that there were no graves in Egypt which to be buried, that you have taken us out here. So why have you done this? Verse number 12. Isn't this what we have told you in Egypt? Leave us alone. We will serve the Egyptians. Because it's good for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. She says, what do you mean? When did they say this? When did they say this in Egypt? Now they said this in Shemot chapter 5, verse number 21. Over there they said, let the Lord look upon you and judge what you are doing to us. Next Rashi is a grammar. Let's continue in verse number 13. Moses said to the Jewish people, Al tira'o, do not be afraid. Hisatzvu, stand firm. Uru'u es Yeshuas Hashem, and you'll see the salvation of God, which God will do for you, hayom, this day. Because as you see the Egyptians today, you won't see them again forever. So Rashi says, the way that you have seen them that is only today. It is only today that you have seen them, but shall no longer continue to see them. Verse 14. Hashem yilachem lachem, God will fight for you. Va'atem tachishan, all you should do is remain silent. Rashi says, Hashem yilach lachem, for you, as we find, lachem is for you in many verses in the Torah. And that completes the Chumash of the day. And now we go to the Tanya of the day. The Alter Rebbe continues. It says the Alter Rebbe has thus far discussed the two levels of union of the divine will. One analogous to a chariot and its rider. That's called, the patriarchs were called like a chariot that is totally nullified to its rider. The second, the unity of the body and soul. That the body is also like a chariot to its rider. Both of these levels of unity are achieved by performing mitzvahs. And Alter Rebbe gives the analogy that the mitzvah, when we do a mitzvah, we become like a chariot to its rider, or become like a body to the soul. How he now goes on to describe a third and higher level of unity that is achieved through the study of Torah. Now, the Rebbe will teach us the power of learning of Torah. So he says, but thought and meditation in the word of Torah, with his mind, and the power of speech when I learn Torah with my mouth, these being the innermost garments of the divine soul, and thus closer to the soul itself and the faculty of action, the external garments. Machshava, dibur, maaseh. The Rebbe explained in the beginning of Tanya that there are three garments: thought, speech, and action. Thought is like a soul to speech. Speech is like a soul to action. So what are the two high garments? Thought and speech. Well, the most mundane physical garment is action. So when we learn Torah with our mouth and we learn Torah with our thought, we contemplate in the learning of Torah. Now we're using out the more spiritual parts of our garments to clothe and connect to godliness. And surely the divine soul that encloses in them when I think Torah and when I learn Torah with my mouth. At that time, kula miuchadim mamish. At that time, when I'm thinking the words of Torah and I'm learning Torah, they are fused together. And here the Alter Rebbe uses an expression, miuchadim mamish biyichud gomer. They're fused together in a perfect unity with the divine will, and not merely a vehicle. Maisa, when I do an action, then the concept becomes a vehicle, but the vehicle is ultimately separate from the rider, and that's a gashmis. Physicality is something separate from spirituality. But when I learn Torah with my mind, which is spiritual already to physical, when I learn Torah with my mouth, which speech is also a little bit more spiritual than physical. So now there's a true fusion. It's more than the chariot and the rider. They become infused as one. And that's the greatness. That's why it says the learning of Torah is the greatest thing. So not only a chariot. For the divine will is identical with the halachic subject as which one thinks and speaks. You're pashut learning what the Eibishter wanted. Whether you understand it, whether you don't, whether you, and if you understand it, it's even better. So you understand divine will. Shakol halachas, because every law in the Torah is God's ratzon, is God's will. That's what God wanted. Hein pratam shachas apnei ratzon layin is a particular expression of the innermost divine will of God. Shekach ala b'ritzaynai. For this is what God wanted. This is what went, so to say, in the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shadov is a mutter. This is kosher. This is allowed. I kosher. I potter. Or this is something that is permissible. This is something that you're exempted. I zakai. Or this is something that you're innocent. Or the opposite. This is what the Eibishter wanted. Now the Eibishter wanted these things, and now you have learned it, and your mind has become part of that knowledge. So too the combination of all the words of the Torah, Nevi'im Ksuvim, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. All these things, these are all an expression of the will of God and His wisdom. Is, as we mentioned before, that the Torah and God is one. They are one with God. They are united in a perfect unity with God Himself. The ultimate unity. As we expressed, God is the knower and the knowledge. Like God, you can't separate human being. There's the knower and the knowledge and the subject. By God, the knower, the knowledge, the subject are all one entity. So by God, His wisdom and His knowledge and Him as one. There's no separation. As we explained before, that God is a concept of unity. And now you understand what it means that the Eibush, the God and the Torah are absolutely one. They are not merely organs of the king as the mitzvahs, but they are actually one. So that's the higher level of unity. We explained before, we try to give an analogy of a body and a soul, or the concept of a rider and a chariot. But here, when you learn Torah, it's not a rider and a chariot, not a body and a soul. It's total unity as one. Now, since the divine will, which is in a perfect unity with God Himself, stands completely revealed in the divine soul and in the garments. Now I learned Torah, so now the Torah has become one with my mind. Meaning it's thought and speech, while a person occupies himself with the words of Torah, and there's nothing obscure divine will at that time. Why? Because when one studies Torah, the divine will and the wisdom contained in it comes in full expression in one's soul and its faculty of thought and speech. So at that moment, it follows that at that moment, the soul and the garments of thought and speech are truly united with God. As with Kiyuchud, with the unity comparable to what God's speech and thought, with His essence being, as explained above, that the Torah, the Eibishter's Torah is God's speech, and Torah is God's thought, and they're united with God. And now my thought and my speech came united with the speech of the Torah and the wisdom of the Torah. We all become one. Because there's nothing separate from God, as mentioned before. Insofar as nothing can be hidden from God. So that's the greatness of learning Torah. There's nothing more powerful. There's nothing more unity with God than the learning of Torah. Not only that, moreover, their unity is unity of the divine soul and its faculty with God that is attained through Torah study is even more exalted and more powerful than the unity of God's infinite light with the upper and spiritual worlds. Now the Alter Rebbe goes a step further. And it says, where can I acquire this unity? So you might think I can acquire this unity in the other worlds. With it's a spiritual world. Comes out to that and says that actually the learning of Torah in this world is more powerful than the learning of Torah in the upper worlds. Why? For the divine will is actually manifest in the soul and its garments that are engaged in Torah learning. This is the identical with the Torah being studied. I'm doing that. The Abishah gave the Torah to this world. And when I learn Torah, I unite myself in this world with the Torah. And I don't have that in the upper worlds. All the supernal worlds receive the vitality by the way of the light and the life derived from the Torah, which is God's will and wisdom. As written, you have made them all from your wisdom. So the upper world, you're receiving also the wisdom of God, but you're not receiving it in a physical way. It came a thus it follows the wisdom of Torah, God's wisdom, meaning the Torah transcends them all. It must be above all the worlds, since it's their source. In fact, the Torah, God's will, is described as encompassing all the worlds, meaning that is the level that cannot become enclosed in the worlds, but rather animates and illuminates them. The slavish b'seichel says it's from a distance, from above. Like Machayu, Meila, Maila, B'chinas Machir transcends in encompassing manner. And this level, which transcends all worlds, that is closed, truly revealed in one soul, and one soul's gone when he studies Torah. So that's the power that that only in this world we can actually, not only that the body and the mind and the mouth become a chariot, but they actually become one. And that cannot be accomplished in the upper worlds. That only can be accomplished in this world. That we can connect the Eibishter, God. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to connect God to the physical. So here the Alter Rebbe says the best way to be able to connect the Eibishter to the physical is to learn Torah. Where? Specifically in this world. Now you might say, I'm learning Torah, and I don't feel this connection. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara answers this question. It says, even though he does not see it. The Gemara says he doesn't see it. When one studies Torah, he's unable to consciously experience the unity of his soul with God, which he attained thereby. Yet the Gemara answers, and then the Neshama feels it. Even though you don't feel it, you're learning Torah, you don't feel this unity, but your neshama feels this unity. In fact, this is precisely why he can endure such unity with God, precisely because he cannot feel it, unlike the supernal worlds. There, where God is not obscure and is in this world, as is in this world, and they cannot therefore endure such unity with God without becoming completely nullified and losing their identity entirely. So that's why in this world, thank God, we cannot feel it. Because if we felt it, we wouldn't be physical people. We would come like angels in heaven, and we wouldn't feel it, and we wouldn't be ourselves. So God makes sure that we don't feel it, and that's why we keep our physical reality. At the same time that we keep our physical reality, our soul in our physical body comes totally united with God in a unity that cannot be accomplished anywhere else. This unity cannot be accomplished anywhere else. And that ends the Tanya of today's Tanya.
Wow.
I want to wish a happy birthday to Yanko Bechana, who's 102 years old today.
Mazel tov. Wow.
Whoa. Till 120. he should continue to have health and happiness and nachas from all his family.
Amen.
We now continue. We're not continuing. If you want to say the Tillim of the day, today is the 12th day of the month. Tillim of day is chapter 66, 66, 67, 68. And that's it. 66, 67, and 68 is the Tillim Psalms of the day. Have a beautiful, happy, wonderful day. We'll see you, Misham, tomorrow at 8 a.m. Have a wonderful day.
You too, Rabbi. Thank you.